it lands on any soil and there's a plan. It's really the country is so rich. We're just really bad managers of our wealth. So much corruption as well. But it's a small country that with the resources that we had, I thought about, okay, if I'm going to dedicate myself to generating development, I have to start at home.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce herself. Carolina, please go ahead.
Thank you, Maurice, for the invitation. My name is Carolina Pozo. I'm from Ecuador. I'm 38. I'm currently based in New York City. So, I was born and raised in Quito, in the capital city. And when I graduated from high school, I actually went to school for my undergrad in Toronto in Canada.
Okay.
I was there for 4 years. A great international experience. For me, I was in a very quite big university in one of the most diverse cities in the world. So that was one of my eye-opening experiences that translated into a lot of things afterwards in my life. And then I did my master's in public policy. So I did my undergrad in economics, then I did my master's in public policy in Bocconi in Milan. And
Wow.
So by the time I was 23, I graduated from my master's. And I did a short internship in DC, and then I went back to Ecuador, actually. So
Okay.
I was in Ecuador again for 8 years before I moved to New York in 2017. So that's a bit of a summary timeline of how my life has been in terms of.
Yeah. Wow. So you've been in a lot of places. Tell us a bit about your upbringing in Ecuador. In Quito, that's one of the bigger towns, right? It's the capital, right? So, yeah, did you grow up in an urban area, rural area? And why ultimately you had that desire of leaving Ecuador and studying abroad?
Quito, I lived in the outskirts of the city, basically surrounded by nature. And that now we don't have in that area, so it's very populated. We're talking about 30 years ago.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful. Ecuador is a fantastic place to be raised at. I was very lucky because it's a very small country but very rich in terms of ecosystems, of culture. Quito is has the most beautiful old towns in the whole of Latin America. We're a very rich country in resources. I'm going to give you some very simple examples so you understand the dimension of its richness. I don't know if you like to drink a juice in the morning, for example. In Ecuador, you can have a different type of juice every day of the year.
Oh.
That's the level of diversity that you can have in terms of fruits and vegetables and agriculture. And so we're very fulfilled with a lot of natural wealth, I would say, as a country. But I was growing up through my family's vocation for the social service. I was really exposed also to the complexities of Ecuador and what it involves to be, and the responsibility that we have also to give back. So from early on, through my mom's dedication to doing charity work, and my dad's also commitment in public service, I was really, part of those conversations. I was the oldest granddaughter from my dad's side of the family. I remember all their, conversations around politics and the current situation. There's always something happening. They say Latin American countries, we talk a lot about politics and soccer.
Yeah.
And I have to say that's very true for my family. So that was always a topic of conversation that I was very, close to hearing, and I was so much older than the rest of my cousins, so I was always in the adults table listening to this conversation. So when I was in when was it, 11th grade, so a year before graduating, I started to think about what kind of thing really moved me, and that's when I think my spark of purpose started. And I proposed that in the high school where I was studying, we could implement an after-school program where we would help the kids of the employees in their homework and provide additional classes for computer classes and a bunch of other stuff that they normally wouldn't have access to, because the public school system, unfortunately, in Ecuador is not at the standards, I would say, where it should be. So I think that was the first experience that really got me thinking how you can go without doing too much through the resources that you have at hand, start to have impact and helping others in a way that is not necessarily a charity donation. So with a deeper meaning. I think that was my first experience that I can remember thinking, wow, this is something that I would love to continue doing in some way. I wasn't sure how. I was only 15 when I started that. So when I graduated from high school, that's when I decided I needed a bit of an international experience. I was to explore what to study. And I do have a lot of economists in my family. I would have to say there's some influence there. And I decided, I opted up to study economics, and but always curious about the development side. So a lot of the courses that I took were in economic development, economic growth, public policy, and understanding a bit. I wanted to really understand like what's going on in my country. How can I learn from what's happening abroad and different economic realities into what Ecuador should be? How do we work on those gaps? So those are a few of the questions that I had, and I think that's what really pushed me to decide to study abroad. And I was lucky enough to have my parents support that transition into Toronto for my 4 years of economics at York. Yeah.
Cool. And do you have siblings?
I do have my sister. She's 2 years younger than me, and my brother, who's 9 years younger than me.
Okay.
The three of us did study in Canada, so I was the first one in, and then the two followed. And I actually work with my sister very closely in everything that I do. So she's the co-founder of all this social project. So she's an essential part of everything that we've done, because we've connected in that way. Although she studied something very different. She got a communications and humanities major, but she's a sommelier. So that translates into the work that we do today. Very well. But yeah, and our underlying, the reason we wake up, it's really our purpose for social impact.
Okay. And she's also in the US now, your sister?
No, she's based in Quito, but she travels quite a bit as well. Comes and helps a lot with the sales aspect, the commercial side of the company. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let us jump to Canada. What did you learn in Canada that you're using now in the work? And we haven't revealed actually to the audience what you actually are doing. We will go there. Yeah. What you were 4 years there. So what happened?
I think for me it was a great experience to be in a very diverse city, like I said. I think at that point it was the most diverse city in the world. I don't know if some other city beat it already, but you really get a sense of the world in the small context. And my university had 60,000 students, and we all lived on campus. It was living in a small city with a small world and learning from so many different cultures, and also so many perspectives on everything. So it was really an eye-opening experience for me. Learning each of them from their own specific context would arrive to Canada. Canada is a very inclusive country, I would say. Communities are really open to diversity, and for me that was essential. Coming from Ecuador, obviously I was exposed to some international students and such, but not to the level as a university like that. So that for me was really great. And also, learn about how a country operates is a very different context. Many other different type of challenges, of course, but Toronto being a cosmopolitan city, full of culture, of a vibrant community, and I think especially what sparked for me there was the entrepreneurial spirit. See so many people, launching new things, creating new projects, thinking about, launching companies. That was something so new in my head. And from a very early age, learning about how that was operating. And, the Ecuadorian community in Toronto actually is one of the most entrepreneurial. It comes from decades of migration as well, but there's that spirit that most of it, it comes from a place of need. But Ecuadorians are very hardworking, and there's a lot of creativity in what they do. And they've, a lot of the very successful entrepreneurs are from there. So I thought there was a lot of potential in that, and I think that's one of the attributes I think that really initiated from that experience in Toronto.
Yeah, and when we start talking about what you do now, the audience will realize that that entrepreneurial, skill or that particular environment definitely is also within you and a very important aspect of who you are and what you do, right? But let us jump quickly to Italy, to Milano. So yeah.
So I think I have to be honest, there was a double intention in my in that decision. And the reason is because I've always been I love art. I actually wanted to study art for my undergrad initially. Okay. And I didn't have at the end I went for economics, but I wanted to connect in some way to art again. And I found a really good school in Milan, and I knew it was very connected to all the other, cultural art aspects that I missed being around. So I ended up studying there. I went to Bocconi, is a very well-known school. I went to study public policy there because I really just wanted to focus on, okay, and I understood, how things operate on the behavioral level through economics, now how to make this happen through policy. So I think that was a great experience for me. It was a 1.5-year program that I put an internship. I did it at a think tank in DC. And I got very involved in what public policy means, and also to think about, what nonprofits are all about. So, I started hearing a lot about those experiences, and the school had a lot of international professors, so that was really great as well. Because I got the chance to learn how things operate in the European context, in the African context. And actually, one of the best experiences while I was doing my master's is when I had a few weeks off. And with my best friend, we did a trip to India. And this trip to India was a life-changing trip. And I think I'm not the first person to have ever said this, because it does have a lot of impact in people who, when it's your first time there. In my context, I had never been to that part of the world at all. It was really eye-opening. We went with no plan, very low budget. And we were there for a month, actually. And we traveled all across India and looking at the level of poverty, not only in how ingrained it is, but also the dimensions of the scale of the poverty issue in India. That was really something that captured my attention, in the sense, because I was first thinking about public policy, how to implement it, how to solve public problems. And when you take that onto the practical sense and you see a country like India, then you say, oh, that's complicated. That country has to face not only the amount of people, but also, so many different religions, ethnicities. The level of complexity it's immense. It's a bit even overwhelming to a point, right? And just I made that comment because in comparison, you think about Ecuador and how small it is and how rich we are. Dies of hunger in Ecuador, the seed flows, it lands on any soil, and there's a plant. It's really the country is so rich. We're just really bad managers of our wealth. So much corruption as well. But it's a small country that, with the resources that we had, I thought about, okay, if I'm going to dedicate myself to generating development, I have to start at home. And learning from how things work or not work in different countries really inspired me to say, okay, I want to do my own thing and start at home. Because it can't be that, with all the resources that we have, the richness that we get, we still have poverty in it. It makes
So then you ultimately went back, and you were there for 8 years. What did you do?
So I went back. I had just graduated from public policy. I wanted to work for the government in some way, either local or national. But at the moment, none of the parties who were in power really connected in terms of values for me. So I ended up working part-time at a university, coordinating a program on public servant training and governance. But on the side, I decided to start my own nonprofit. And that's how my story starts. So this was, 2008. And alongside with my sister, she was in between Canada and Quito. I shared with her also the story that in India and, my experience in Italy. And we were both thinking, okay, how do we make something out of this? And I started asking, where is the poorest community in Ecuador? How can we help the poorest of the poorest? And no one really knew. I knew it was probably in a rural setting, far away from the big cities. But where is the data? Where is the real information? How do we really know this? And I started asking people who should know this. But the reality of the fact is that there's not good public information on this matter. Maybe now a bit better, but back then it was really bad. So I ended up looking at a very outdated database of communities by parish. So it's like the smallest territorial unit that they analyzed. And I found one that had 99.9% extreme poverty, according to the, World Bank standards of poverty levels of $2, less than $2 a day. And it's a community that was in the middle of the jungle. It was not accessible, only by foot. It was really hard for us to go there, but we went down the list one more. And it captured my attention because it said Tolte, that was the name of the community. And right next to it, it said Nariz del Diablo. So that's the name. It's called the Devil's Nose, of a tourist spot in Ecuador, in the highlands, a very famous train station. So how could it be that the second poorest community in the country, it's at a tourist location? So that was the first question that came up to my head. So we decided to go there, and that's how it started. We took a bus from Quito, and it was like 8 hours to get there. This is also in the highlands. And we said, okay, we arrived, and we said, okay, we need to understand what's happening. They said it was 100 people living in this community. It was not. It was like 1,000 people. And yeah, the reality of it was a very poor community. I wouldn't say not that much different than many other rural communities in Ecuador, but facing a lot of complexities. And that's how the journey started. We created Avanti. Avanti is the name of the profit. I co-founded it with my sister Gabriela, and that was the start of the story of our lives.
And since then, a lot of different things started, right? Different companies, different activities. So Avanti is also a word in from Ecuador, or is it Italian Avanti?
It's an Italian word.
Okay.
It means advance.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was my Italian influence in.
I understand.
The name.
Yeah. Got it. So tell us in your elevator speech in terms of what is Avanti about? Your journey started there, but what are you trying to do?
I'm gonna tell you how I used to say it before it became. So you're gonna understand when I explain. My previous speech was comprehensive development projects. Okay, focus on a specific community to address the most challenging obstacles for development. Okay, and eradicate poverty. When you say comprehensive, what does it mean? It means that you work in different angles. So you have health, education, agriculture, and an economic power. In this case, it was tourism. So that was the hook that was going to activate the local economy. And this was through our institutional vehicle, which is a nonprofit. Nowadays, everything that I worked on is, they call it social innovation. So just because it's funny, a lot of these, trendy words come out, and I took social impact, and back then it was sustainable development, and that was the core of what we do. So to make it sustainable, meaning we don't do charity work, we do participative processes with the community leaders, and it's really about giving them tools so they can take charge of their own development. It's never been about us imposing agendas for the development, but understanding the concept of what they do and bringing on technical support, resources, and whatever is needed for them to continue on. And that's how we envisioned the project, because I'm not an expert in education or health or agriculture. What we did is partner with institutions who are experts on these fields so they could provide the technical assistance that we required to address those specific challenges.
And when you go to your website on avanti.ec, right? Yeah, you can see that for the last 14 years you have been doing a lot of work. But what struck me is it seems, at least to me, but tell me if I'm wrong, that a lot of the work you've done in partnership with different organizations and people. Is that correct? And tell a bit about, yeah, it's not you and your sister going in and doing work and then going away, right? It's through partnerships and with the local population as well. So yeah, tell a bit about that.
Exactly. So there's two ways to go around implementing a new nonprofit. A lot of them build on a very large infrastructure, including a lot of big teams of people, of experts, which incurs a very high cost, right? And what I did is I said, okay, how are we going to be more efficient in terms of what we want to do? So let's keep the team small. Okay? And our team will find the right people based on the project that we're going to launch. So to give you an example, we wanted to work on education in the community. So we found IBM, which was one of our best partners throughout the years. And we implemented very different projects with them. So they would not only bring resources, but also technical support and experts on different fields for that. So I worked a lot with the private sector, but also with the local governments. I've worked with embassies, for example, with the British Embassy. We did a few different projects on training and agriculture. So I think it's a model that, for me, it's more agile. I feel like a lot of the obstacles and the criticism on nonprofits, it's how they become really bureaucratic, very slow, and they're not accountable for their impact. In our case, we wanted to break that. And I think it's a model that worked. And for a few years, let's say the first 6 years, that's what we did. We worked in partnership with local and international organizations, and we implemented projects. But as time went by, we wanted to take the next step. Because we actually finished the project in the highlands, and we were ready to move to a next community. And that's when we arrived to a cacao growing community of farmers in the coast of Ecuador, in the province of Manabí. And when we started working on that project, based on all the lessons learned from the previous community, we said, how can we make this even more effective? Okay. So on the other one, just to give you a sum up of what we did, like I said, we worked in building from infrastructure for education to capacity building. We redid the whole train station where the train would arrive. And we worked with the local government to reactivate that tourist location. We did for community enterprises, for community tourism, for handicrafts, for dance, and for the restaurant service. we basically helped reshape the whole community in 6 years. And they ended up being, very effective in continuing all these projects. Now they have a hotel. So really it was a great experience. And the fact that they have demand to what they do just will keep things going. And that was our main indicator of success. So when we started thinking how we're going to activate the economic activity in this new location, thinking about cacao, we started understanding a lot of the problems involved in the cacao supply chain. So how are we going to be, okay, fantastic that we give tools, that we keep on working on training, but how to make this even more impactful? So that's when we decided to create a social business, a company that would work together with a nonprofit to make a very sustainable supply chain that would be not only fair, but could reinvest profits back into the community. This doesn't mean that we don't work with other companies or other organizations. We still do that. However, we wanted to create something that we could control and that we could really be accountable in terms of what we do and how we're going to disrupt an industry that has been traditionally very unethical in their practices. And I'm talking not only in Ecuador, I'm talking worldwide with cacao farmers. So, and that's how our story with MUZE, which is the name of the company that we created in 2018, came about. So that was sort of the decision-making process towards it.
How do you pronounce that name?
MUZE, M-U-Z-E.
Yeah, you mentioned the word unethical in the whole chocolate. Can you name a couple of examples of on unethical business?
Yes, so there's a few different layers of that. Starting with the most important one, it's the social side, the humans. So basically, there's a lot of child slavery involved, child work in many countries, and part of that is because there's no accountability in terms of sourcing for most of the biggest producers of cacao-based products in the world. And that's something that has, this is not something I say, it's published everywhere. And child work has, been one of the biggest concerns in this industry. The second one related to how that traceability is not really there, it's how the intermediation works in this industry. So there's so many people involved, from the grower to the company. There's many, many layers. So the actual price that the farmer is paid is not a fair price at all. So all this intermediation, because it's a commodity that is publicly traded, also there's a lot of complications in that process, because the largest companies really don't go to the field, don't understand the local realities, and they depend on these international players who are controlling the largest masses of exports for this specific industry. So there's that huge disconnect. Okay. And on top of that, there's another layer, which is the damage to the fields. So there's a lot of practices to promote productivity that don't necessarily are great for the soil. So there's a lot of impact in terms of the environmental impact of that is crazy. And then if you add on logistics, shipping, packaging, and plastic involved in all these consumer products, you're talking about really high footprint, carbon footprint involved. So there's always an aspect of environmental aspects, the supply chain traceability, and the human side, which is very, very complicated. And this is not something very unique to the cacao world. I think it translates to a lot of agricultural products that are mass consumed globally. But it is something that only a few companies acknowledge. Now you have a lot of labels and certifications and things. I wish they were true, but many of them are really not translated into real impact and real responsibility. And they keep on changing. It's like the fashion of the words. You say what's unethical, now they say the SDGs, the B Corps, the fair trade. There's so many new and always new every year certifications that companies are trying to, put on their on their labels, but the reality that the real accountability and the real responsibility of that is very limited. So, and the problem is that even if the few of us that are smaller companies are doing it, the bigger impact comes from the largest players in the industry.
So how is MUZE able to turn this around? Have you turned it totally around? And if not totally as yet, or what is the biggest challenge within this?
I wish totally around would be a possibility. I think it can be done. However, I would love, how with bad competition, it comes, they just copy the good things that you do. I wish they would copy the ethical practices that we have. Because, part of our innovation process involved making a lot of sacrifices along the way. For example, looking for alternative packaging and using compostable packaging and only one layer of packaging for the product, which is something that most chocolates on the market don't have, which is a more expensive option, obviously, than using plastic. And that's something that we decided to move forward with. We are compensating the carbon footprint of every gram of chocolate that we produce, even the ones that we use for sampling. So not only the ones sold that we do, we add up all the CO2 that we created, and we're compensating by protecting the Ecuadorian Amazon through a partner nonprofit called Iachana Foundation, which has been internationally recognized for their conservation efforts. And there's land under our name in terms of what we're preserving and how we're helping to promote, and that property is going to expand the more we produce. We're doing consolidated shipping as much as we can. There's always some CO2 and pollution involved in the shipping, especially with air freight. And so I can't say there's a total shift in everything, but there are some measures that decisions that you can start making as a company that will start, to fix sort of the problems. In our case, I think doing direct trade and paying fair price should not be something that you are proud of. It should be a common practice. It should be common sense. So, making it a thing that you're doing direct trade, it is something that we obviously value, but it's something that many people should start thinking more about, because it's not only if you don't really care about the social side, even think about what you're consuming. If you go to the ports in Europe and you see how the cacao arrives from Africa, you would get scared. Like, it's really, this amount of beans not even packaged in both. It's really like zero traceability, everything mixed up with rocks, with fish, with whatever comes. So really, I think as consumers, we do need to think beyond. There's the health aspect behind it. There's a social responsibility behind it, and being conscious consumers, I think, is something that we should definitely, all of us should practice more often.
Is that then the reason that you decided to go, talking about consumers, that you decided to go to the US and that part of the company is based here?
Yeah. So as an entrepreneur, and this goes back to a bit of my story before, when you think of entrepreneurship, there's all this spark of excitement. You're like, oh, I want to create something. I want to design something new. And I believe that very truly from the very beginning. And when I failed in many other businesses before, because I've ventured into a few different things, you understand being an entrepreneur also means they have to fail and fail greatly, and maybe fail more than once, and build that resilience. And I think when you really know what your underlying purpose is, that process of starting something and going through this entrepreneurial cycle makes it easier, because and especially now that, it's been a few years since we started and we went through the tough phases, and, there's always challenges on the way. But we're very true to our values in terms of things that we're never going to sacrifice. And we're very clear that from our packaging to the purist and for the traceability, for the social impact, and these are the kind of things that really motivate us, to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if people in the US would like to buy your chocolate, that's the MUZE brand, or
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So currently we sell in Ecuador, in the US, and in Puerto Rico. So for the US, we have a few different retail partners and also online. The website is MUZE Cacao, MUZECACAO.com.
Mm-hmm.
Also find us on social media, where we share a bit more about our stories. But basically, MUZE in the US has been, starting a new CPG product in New York is not the easiest decision, because you're facing the most competitive market. But that gave us I think the leeway to understand and fix things fast, and push us to be more innovative. So now we have a brand that is an award-winning brand. It's all vegan, functional chocolate that can give you energy, can relax you, can indulge you, and all these products are basically something that come out of something that we're really passionate about. And when they say, do you sell chocolate because you like chocolate? I'm like, of course I love chocolate. But that's not the underlying reason why we're here. And we do want to reinvest and give back, and to the level that we will have a real impact in the lives of the farmers back home. And I think the US offers a lot of windows for the world, and opens a lot of opportunities for expansion as well. So, and that has been our experience now, 8 years in New York, maybe living here 8 years, with the company 5 years. And we're expanding to Europe this year. And we're very happy that also in this process, we've started working on a bigger project to launch the largest chocolate factory and the most sustainable chocolate brand in Ecuador. This new project is called Cacao EcoVillage. Anyone who's interested in the circular economy of cacao, they could visit that website as well, cacaoecovillage.com. And what we have there is basically a project where we're even thinking beyond chocolate and working on other byproducts to eradicate waste in the cacao, in the chocolate production cycle. So there's a few different initiatives. We're really excited about that, and lucky enough to be in a city that really pushes us to keep the innovation going in terms of what we offer. And
you were talking about the Cacao EcoVillage, and you're talking about other products than only chocolate. You're talking about basically, what would be thrown away, right? In under normal circumstances, but you are planning to use it for other products. Can you quickly tell a little bit about that? What type of other products do we need to think about then?
Yeah, so in the chocolate making process, basically you're wasting 80% of the plant. 80. And imagine, Ecuador is the third largest producer and exporter of cacao in the world. We're small geographically, but we export more cacao than all of Brazil. That's how relevant we are in the market. So if you only think about our local opportunities, we are exporting so much, we're wasting 80% of the plant. You could do a lot of byproducts. Sticking to the food industry, you can do with the husks, you can do cacao tea. You can do a lot with butter, you can do cosmetics, medicinal products, construction materials, biofuels, packaging. So the actual packaging of chocolate is made from fibers from cacao.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So all that waste from the plants, it's really a valuable asset that we are incorporating into the Cacao EcoVillage project, even as a construction material for the infrastructure of the factory. So endless opportunities a lot of opportunities for business as well that could become very relevant and also good additional revenue for the actual farmers, because they're not only selling the beans, but a lot of the other stuff. And the pulp, also the pulp of the bean. So when you open up a cacao pod, I don't know if you've ever seen that. There's that white pulp.
Yeah.
That right now, freeze-dried, for example, is a sweetener.
Yeah.
And we use that in one of our recipes as well. Or you can use it as a beverage as well. And it has a lot of antioxidants. Cacao is a superfood. So really, the possibilities are endless. Which I need to spark the interest in people who understand the value of that circularity for the cacao. And that's the vision for Cacao EcoVillage.
Wow, that's fantastic. And just for the listeners, I will have a conversation later this month, also with a chef from Venezuela, who cooks with a lot in terms of food waste, right? Uses everything of every vegetable. So this is really important. It's great that you do that. One quick question is, the security situation in Ecuador is not good. I understood, at least. How is that affecting, or is that affecting your business at the moment and the work you do?
So unfortunately, I have to say, the reality of security in Ecuador, we've never experienced this before.
No.
So unfortunately, this is something that other countries were close by had experienced in the past, and gang violence and stuff like that. But Ecuador was never like that. And in the recent months, we've had an uprising of these gangs that are internationally coordinated with other countries' crime scene, and we don't really understand a lot of the complexities of this. But in the real sense of our daily lives, yeah, we've taken a lot of measures. The new government is trying to implement a lot of measures that capture the people behind all these really terrible episodes that we've had to live the past few months. So definitely it is affecting our local economy. I'd face a lot of challenges on the field as well, because there's this practice of vacunas, they call it. So basically, if people go around charging fees, you have to pay to be not to get protection, and that's really something that we've never ever experienced in Ecuador. This is something that we heard happen quite often in Mexico, in Colombia, but so if you open up a business, they come to you and they say, "Oh, you have to pay this monthly fee unless you want to experience dealing with the local gangs," and that's obviously out of fear. A lot of people are paying, but it's a terrible practice, and this is something that hopefully they control it fast, and I think the government is moving in the right direction, because we don't want it to affect it more than it really should. I have to say, from the 6 months ago, it was worse, and now the government has been very effective in capturing a lot of the leaders behind all this. However, it's not an easy problem to solve. It would be naive to say it's only an Ecuadorian focus problem. It really is an international structure that manages all these crime scene operations. But it's part of the adversities that we have to face. I talked about all the positive aspects of starting a company. We could have another whole podcast on the resiliency we've built through. I will explain in one sentence. Earthquakes, pandemic, safety, curfews, and now we have no electricity. So a few different obstacles along the way.
Yeah.
But you know what? I guess it's part of, working in a country like Ecuador, where the beauty is there, the opportunity is there. We just have to keep going.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's an important work. It's really fascinating, and we might have a second podcast about all of this. I would like to ask you a couple of questions that I always ask, and they related with the virtual walk that I started during COVID, because during COVID I was still able to do my 100-mile walk in a week, but I was not able to walk with others. So then I started this podcast as the virtual walk. So I have always a couple of questions that I like to ask my guest. And if you would be asked to walk 100 miles in a week, so it means 15 to 20 miles per day, why would you walk? Is there a cause that you would walk for, or something that you would like to lift up while you're doing that?
Yeah, it has to be the farmers. I mean, that's the reason every day we're pushing towards this. And I think it's very important, this kind of mission that you have, because it translates to making those daily decisions that are sometimes tough to make. And, when you have a stressful day and sometimes thinking about giving up or shifting fully to something more comfortable, um, you know, I always tell my sister because we talk about this a lot. So why are we still on this if we could only complain about what's going on? Why don't we celebrate the little things that go right sometimes? And for us, that mission to serve others is what keeps us going. And so those are the walks, and who would we walk?
When I walk with an older person, we talk about, why are we walking? Why am I doing this? What drives me? And then quite often we start talking about spirituality and religion, and then also about the younger generation that maybe looks at spirituality and religion differently than some of the older generation. So my question to you is, what do you see happening in the younger generation in your community? So, you can talk both about Ecuador or about New York in terms of the youth and the religion and spirituality.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking like 3 different generations, because I think of, how my grandparents were brought up, how my parents were brought up.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to how we were brought up. In our family, for example, we were all raised Catholic. We were practicing religion up until I was maybe 20. And then I really disconnected from the traditional Catholic practices. However, that doesn't mean that spirituality is not there. And I think for me, the value of that in whichever religion it is, and I think that's part of, living in a very diverse city as well, and exposed to so many different religions. I think the underlying things and the type of values that it promotes. And I think as long as there's true to freedom, that for me is important, and inclusion and respect, and doing good for others, I think that's where we connect. And I have this conversation quite often with my first cousin. He's the oldest one in the family. He's actually a priest.
Okay.
He's a priest, a very well-known priest actually in Latin America. He has a podcast, and he's very active on social media. And I remember when he was doing his studies at the Vatican, he was doing his PhD focused on technology, intersection of technology, social media, and religion. And I would ask him, because maybe we don't share a lot of the same principles, and we have the same opinion about many different issues. However, we do share the same purpose, and first, having a life of purpose. Second of all, doing good for others. He has his own way to do it for doing that, and that's the kind of thing I value in whichever religion you come from, and it's having that level of commitment. However, younger generations, I feel like, and this is not on the religious side, but more on the lifestyle side. I think even in our case, like, there's so much distraction, and that comes from a lot of noise, digital noise, I would say, that is really hard to fight from. Like, me personally, like, sometimes I get caught on to these endless feeds of nothingness, and I think we forget the value of time. And at the end of the day, that's the most scarce resource we have is time, and we have to make use of that better. And I feel like the younger generations that have been brought up connected to these tools, that in a very, I would say, sad situation, if they don't have the family context to guide them through these tools in a good way, they could be caught on into things that are not necessarily good for them, which at the end will make good for their circle. And I think that's part of the responsibility that we have the generation that was exposed to both sides, who we didn't have that digital massive exposure in our early days, but we did have it in the second phase of our life. And because I've felt both, I feel the value of, and I appreciate actually my non-digital lifestyle before, because now I can relate to something different, and I feel like connection and time has to be redefined and taught in a different ways to make sure that we keep relationships healthy, which will mean living more at ease and with more peace. And I think just social media is a channel. It is a channel, but what I think it generates is this instant gratification that you get from any drug, so it could be social media, it could be something else, but that instant gratification is what makes people anxious and what makes all of us anxious, I would say. And when you don't have that, you try to fill it with more noise. So it's like a bad cycle of behavior that I think we all face in some way, because we're all exposed to that. It's really hard to disconnect yourself from it. Because I think there's also a lot of value in what social media brings, and there's opportunities for that. And this digital tool that we're using right now, However, there's so many layers of complexities, that plus everything that comes with AI, which is another whole different aspect of the conversation. It poses even greater challenges to what is real. And I think what is real has to come from very within, because if you start redefining through what you see, you're gonna get fully lost. I think that's what my experience has been, at least.
I heard you say 2 times noise, the noise that's going on. I use, music to help me, to calm me down, to be centered. So I always have a question about music as well. If I ask you to come up with a piece of music or a song that best captures or embodies what you are about for a big part, which song or piece of music would that be, and why?
Well, that's very easy for me, because just like you, I felt like music has been my medicine throughout life. And I wouldn't say one song, but salsa has been an essential aspect of my life, because I feel like my brain works like salsa, It's really, could be fast paced, slow paced, but there's always like a rhythmic excitement and, like fast movement. I don't know. There's something about it really connects, and it's a dance that I practice and I love. So, and it's also very culturally ingrained in obviously Latin America. But it gives me ease, like it really does. Even, in the worst situation, I play that beat, I think it connects. It's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
Right? But it's
If I force you to come up with one song, as one salsa song, which one would you mention? Because I will add it to a playlist that I started, all the songs that were picked by my guests.
There's one very old song, it's called Conteo Regresivo, it's called, from Gilberto Santa Rosa. I can send you the name.
Okay. Great.
Very rhythmic. Yeah, it's one of the first salsa songs that I heard. I really like. I'll send you.
Okay, great, and we will add it to the playlist. I would like to talk a little bit about sustainability. You mentioned that, it's so for me, the Sustainable Development Goals are important. Totally acknowledging that they're far from perfect, but at least as a world, we had a debate, we discussed, and we said, we need to do something. So my question to my guest is twofold around Sustainable Development Goals. Is one, if there is one thing that you would like to share with my audience or with the listeners about the Sustainable Development Goals, pro or against, what would that be? And the second question is, have you heard about the Inner Development Goals? And if so, what are your thoughts about the energy development goals? And if not, I will quickly explain it and then hear your reaction.
So for SDGs, I have to be very honest. I have very mixed feelings about. I think having a global plan makes sense. Yes. Talking the same language on that end. Yes. However, I don't think the institutions behind that practice necessarily are the best example of impact. And I think they were built way too long and they're still operating under an infrastructure that is not necessarily working. And it's been way too long not to question if that structures really work. And I think we have to be more critical in terms of what these international organizations are pushing and how they operate. And they have to be coherent in the way they function as well. And I'm very open about this because I feel like a lot of those practices are outdated. This doesn't mean that the goals themselves are wrong. I feel like all that is 100% valid. They are the right ones. They're on the right path. It helps institutions and governments align their development programs. But in practice, if they actually are changing lives and they're actually providing the results that are needed, or pushing the governments to really do what they have to do, that's where I would be hesitant.
Yeah.
And I think this comes also from, I worked for the city government. I was the head of planning for the city. And I had to do these development plans for the city of Quito. I was managing the budget for the city. I had to budget it in according to goals. I understand the process. I understand its mission, but in the honest truth, there's so many other issues that have to be addressed within. And I feel like we sort of have to go back to basics in terms of what development means. We could talk about the fashionable things to solve, or we can talk about the real issues that are still not being solved, and it's been way too long.
Yeah, and when I think being critical, especially at this moment, is important. I mean, for two reasons: we are behind of reaching the SDGs, and getting closer to 2030, and what's next, right? So you need to critically look at what is working and what not. Now, I came across the inner development goals, and what this growing group of people around the world is saying, one of the reasons that we are not reaching those SDGs is the fact that these system changes and process changes that we require, that we like to have as a world, they will not happen if you don't pay attention to the abilities, skills, and knowledge that you need as an individual and as a community to implement them. And so as a result, they came up with 5 inner development goals: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. Yeah, what is your first reaction when you hear that?
I mean, it sounds very real. I mean, I think there are values that are absolutely necessary, I think. And if there are practices like that can help people align themselves to something, I think it's very valid. These are all different models and methodologies, but as long as they serve a purpose of growth and helps connect people in a way, I think that's great.
Okay, connecting people. That's what I hope that this podcast is also doing.
My question for the next speaker is: if you had a magic wand and you could sort of identify one thing that's currently missing from the world that you could sort of put back in, what would that be? Yeah.
It would be compassion and kindness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. What is your question for the next guest?
If you could do a little elevator pitch on what your legacy for the world would be in a sentence, what would it be?
Do you have any message or invitation or question for the listeners?
I think I would have to connect back to what I do. And I think the invitation for everyone is to really do some conscious shopping. Read through what you're buying. I think there's a lot of misinformation on what the true product is, especially in the chocolate world. There's people behind chocolate. There's cacao farmers behind chocolate. So think twice before you purchase. Look at the ingredients, look at the traceability, look at the actual manufacturers of the products, and really think about what that impact makes in the larger scale, because every single purchase makes a difference. And I think it's an invitation to be more conscious about how we spend our money, but also how we generate positive or negative impact in the world.
Great. And before I thank you for your willingness to talk with me and share your experiences, rich experiences, and awesome insights. Is there one question that I did not ask you that I should have asked you?
I think, what my biggest attribute is something I sort of mentioned, and I want to share that because it comes from a space of identity and self-acknowledgement. I think building resilience is very important. And I think it's something that when you share also the negative experience that you have in your life, if it could help others build that resilience and learn from mistakes, I think that has a lot of power. A lot of I've seen people who face similar circumstances, and we face challenges in different ways. So I think it's important to share those negative aspects and be open to being vulnerable about these kind of issues. Sharing success is the easy side. Sharing the tough parts of, in this case, being an entrepreneur and working in a challenging industry and what it involves on the personal and emotional side of things. I think a lot to be said as well.
Right. And thank you. Actually, I think you did show, you share the positive and the challenges and the opportunities, not only. Yeah, I think I've learned a lot, and I hope that people will start checking out your company, the stuff that you do, and at the minimum, start look at themselves and their own behavior and what you can do. Because yes, we need system changes, but I also think that we can play a role by, because that seems overwhelming, right, at times. So, but you can do things as an individual, and you've alluded to that as well. So, yeah. So thank you for everything you do, and good luck.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.